Well, it's the 250th anniversary of the United States of America, the Declaration of Independence. And that's a very important thing, and that's a very special thing that you should know the history of your country and study the history of your country and the philosophies that it was built upon. So happy 4th of July. And remember, this is what a lot of people forget, is that the United States of America, even though a lot of people say we're a young nation or those kinds of things, we're actually the oldest country in the world, with maybe the exception of some little small country that operates under our founding principles. Every other country in the world has gone through uh, changes in their government since the time the United States of America was formed. And so that's a very important thing. 250 years for a continuous government system is not a small feat. There's not many times in history where that has happened. There has, of course, been monarchies that went for very long periods of time, which is where people experienced a lot of tyranny. And this is important because the United States was really formed as a result of all the lessons that had been learned over over all of that period of time of history, uh, to try and inform a place to live where people could really be free as individuals and put the individual freedoms at the foundation of everything and then build from there. Even today, many of the governments that are formed today around the world, they skip the step of making the individual sovereign. And it's just a really basic principle, but it's a principle that has been not very often in history has been applied. There are America was not. We looked at like the ancient Greeks and the Romans, and then of course all the philosophies of the Enlightenment era, um, to try and form the best system that we could that they could do, the founders could do. It's also important to remember that the culture of our nation doesn't just start at the point that the country was created. There's almost as many years of of this land in which we were colonies of different, particularly England, but also other European countries, Spain and uh, I think the France. Obviously the French with the southern United States down there, Louisiana and that sort of thing, and the Dutch, and also German was almost considered a second national language at the time the country was formed. There was a lot of German-speaking influence, and Swiss. Everybody was here, and that's partly why America, even from the beginning, is known as like a great melting pot. Many different people from everywhere. However, it's very important that we follow laws in doing that, or else everything erodes. And that's a sticky point. People, it's an inconvenience that must be followed. Is that if in order to maintain these rights and freedoms, we have to follow the law in terms of people immigrating into the country and that sort of thing. We want to welcome people, but it has to be done in the right way, or else everybody loses. These are hard facts of people. They cause a lot of political uh, turmoil, but that's another very important part of the United States. We're always kind of in turmoil. It's a messy process. We have such a system of checks and balances that where people, that's one way that tyranny and dictatorships become enforced in different places, is because people at some given moment want some instantaneous change rather than having to do all the deliberation and the arguing and the back and forth. And that's a wonderful thing too about putting the individual as sovereign, is that you have all the rights that are not stated as specifically under the federal government or under the state governments are your rights. And they're all your rights. That's actually not, I didn't say that the correct way. Everything is to actually protect what we consider to be your inalienable rights. But in terms of how they are interpreted, if they're not specified as being in some sort of codification in the Constitution or in the state's laws or legislations, then then we just accept that they apply to us as individuals, which is a lot different than a lot of other places in the world. In a lot of other places in the world, they consider that the government has the control over the individual firstly and foremost, and we're the other way around. So, which allows us to maintain super amounts of creativity. And sometimes people talk about the culture of the United States as being young and and that sort of thing. But really, we've been here for a very long time, and the fact that we have been so free and so able to have freedom of speech, which is a huge part of creativity and developing culture, and other rights. Our culture has evolved at a very rapid pace, and we've created all these wonderful new genres of art forms and inventions, and we're a very small percentage of the world population, and we've produced a tremendous amount under this system, not because we're more gifted or smarter than everybody else. It's just because we have a system that's allowed each individual to find their own path. And that's another challenge that we have, is that sometimes we want to do things that we think are make life easier for us as a society, but what we're ultimately doing is we're undermining that ability for people to find their own paths. We're putting people on a track, and we're putting them in a pigeonhole, and they're going to stay there. They're very hard to get out of that, and we don't want to have our system of government and society get sold on this idea that there's some easy street. The easy street is the blessed street of finding your own way, and each other helping one another at an individual level, So these are very important things to just learn about all the philosophies and where all this came from. You could study it for years, but there's just some very important principles to learn. And back to culture. I mean, I've listened to music over the last 9 years or so with more intent than I ever did in my previous years. And America has been great at developing invention, including the arts, and all these wonderful genres of music that are enjoyed around the world today sprung up out of all the conditions that made the United States what it is. And these are rock and roll and blues and country and jazz and folk music, or at least American folk style music, and Western swing, and on and on and on. I mean, just came out of this place of cultivating newness and new ideas. But music can do so much for our soul. But there's music that we listen to that is kind of the rhythm and the beat of the music that does something to us in the moment. It's has an emotional response in the brain. And then there's the lyrics and the meanings within the music, and with any art, not just music. But we have to be, music can be so, and art in general can be so important to our soul and our meaning, but we have to be very careful not, and this could also be visual arts and movies and things like that, not to allow ourselves to just like art and culture because it's popular. And that's one of the things that happens with mass media and marketing, is a lot of, when we're young, we lose, or a lot of people do. It's just a very common thing amongst young people especially, but even going through your whole life, is that we lose the personal touch with the art because we're just being sold on the popularity of whatever it is that's there. So when art should be a personal experience, both in creating it and in enjoying it. And so as you can get so much goodness out of art, because a good artist, and there's many artists that are not really that great, it's like anything else, but a good artist puts a lot of emotion into the art and a lot of meaning and messaging into the art, and you need to be able to connect with that. And it's not just because it's your friends like it, or because somebody on television tells you that this is good. You have to do that for yourself, that whole process of doing that for yourself is very enriching and rewarding. So I love you, and you're doing such great things, and you are the artist. Be the artist, and enjoy all these freedoms that we have, and be aware of the things that are always challenging the freedoms of the United States. And the United States was mostly a country that had the principle of neutrality in international affairs, and probably since World War II, but probably even more so since the Vietnam War, there has been a faction that has great control within the United States government that has not really operated on the founding principles of this country, and that is probably the greatest threat to our freedoms, is this idea of that the United States can be used by these special groups, if you want to call them that, or nations, or special interest, or like some people call the deep state, and these kinds of things to promote their agenda, using all the great wealth and things that have been created from all the freedoms that we have, and that will destroy this country. So yeah, something we had to be very, very cognizant of is that there's a great amount of wealth and power that was created by all of this that many different groups, both within the United States and around the world, would like to have control over, so that they could use it for their interests that were not founded on the founding principles of this country. And so you have to be aware of that as a citizen. You have a responsibility as a citizen. It doesn't come without any responsibility to be able to live under the Constitution. You do have a responsibility to be aware. And the founding fathers made that a really key point amongst all of them. All of them said that, and there's some very famous quotes related to the fact that this country requires the citizens to take responsibility, to understand the Constitution and the laws and the way the country works. So that's your responsibility as an American. I love you, and happy 4th of July.